The first sign of trouble wasn't the screams. It wasn't the smoke pooling low along the valley floor like a wounded ghost either. It was the stillness, that eerie, unnatural quiet that settled over the prairie just moments before the world remembered to fall apart. Rancher Elias Crow felt it before he heard or saw a thing. He was riding the western fence line of his property, the sun just beginning to slip behind the red shoulders of the bluffs, when the air tightened in his chest without reason. His mare, Juniper, lifted her head and snorted, ears stiff and twitching toward the northeast. Elias slowed her with a gentle tug. "What is it, girl?" he murmured, though he already knew. Animals sense danger, and Juniper sensed something burning in the bones of the world. Then, finally, the sound came. A far-off, trembling boom, followed by a curling plume of black smoke rising from the foothills beyond Dead Man's Gorge. Elias straightened in the saddle. "That ain't thunder," he whispered. And then he heard it. A scream. Faint. Falling apart on the wind. But unmistakably human. It hit him like a hammer to the chest. Elias drove his heels into Juniper's sides. "Go!" The mare bolted forward, hooves tearing across scrub and dust. Wind clawed at Elias's face and stung his eyes, but he didn't blink. Didn't dare. Someone was out there. Someone hurting. Someone alone. And hell if he was going to let another soul die on his land. Not again. Not ever again. The fallen stagecoach. The smoke grew thicker the closer they came, rising in angry spirals that smeared the sky red. Elias leapt a fallen tree trunk, skidded down a sandy embankment, and cut across a dry creek bed toward the narrow trail that wound between two jagged limestone cliffs. Dead Man's Gorge. A place with a reputation even coyotes were smart enough to respect. Juniper slowed only when they reached the mouth of the gorge, her nostrils flaring. Elias swung out of the saddle before she fully stopped, his boots skidding across gravel as he ran into the haze. "Hello?" he shouted. His voice bounced between the walls of stone, thin and panicked. "Anyone out here?" Another scream answered him, closer now, sharp with fear and agony. Elias sprinted toward the sound. The wreck came into view all at once. A stagecoach smashed against a boulder, its wheels torn loose. One side caved in as if the earth itself had reached up and crushed it. The horses lay tangled and still, their harnesses twisted. Something must have exploded, maybe the lamps, maybe a gunpowder crate, but the back half of the coach was engulfed in fire. And beneath a fallen beam, trapped halfway between flames and open air, was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 19, dusty braids strewn across her face, dress singed and torn, both hands clawing desperately. "You said?" Part 1 without headings. ChatGPT said. Here is Part 1 rewritten with no headings, in smooth narrative form. I've written it as long and detailed as possible within system limits. Future parts will continue seamlessly. The first sign of danger was not the screams. It wasn't even the smoke drifting low over the valley like a wounded spirit. It was the stillness, that uncanny quiet that settles just before life remembers to shatter. Rancher Elias Crow felt it deep in his ribs before anything else. He had lived most of his life under wide skies, and he knew the moods of the land the way a sailor knows the sea. Something was wrong. Juniper, his chestnut mare, felt it too. She stopped mid-stride, head jerking toward the northeast, nostrils flaring. Elias followed her gaze, squinting past the golden wash of late sunlight. The horizon was calm, the rolling prairie unbothered, at least at first glance. But then came the sound. A boom. Not thunder. Something sharper, meaner. A heartbeat later, a column of dark smoke curled up behind the bluffs. "Damn!" Elias breathed. And then, thin and fraying in the wind, came a scream. Human. Without thought, without hesitation, he kicked his heels into Juniper's sides, and the mare lunged forward. Brush slapped against Elias's boots as they tore across the open land, the wind stinging his eyes and stealing his breath. But he didn't blink. Couldn't. He had lost too many people in his lifetime. Neighbors, travelers, a brother who had died with a horse pinning his leg. Elias had learned the awful quiet of regret. He refused to hear it again. They raced toward Dead Man's Gorge, that narrow cut of stone where trouble liked to hide. As they neared the entrance, smoke thickened, the air turning bitter with burning wood and oil. Juniper slowed, uneasy, and Elias swung out of the saddle before the mare fully stopped. "Hello?" he shouted into the haze. His voice bounced between cliffs, but returned smaller, hollow. He stepped forward again, boots crunching over loose rock. "Anybody out here?" Another scream answered him, piercing, terrified, laced with pain. Closer now. Elias ran. The wreckage revealed itself like a nightmare rolling out of smoke. A stagecoach lay on its side, shattered against a boulder. The front wheels were gone. The back end was on fire, flames chewing through the splintered wood like starving wolves. Two horses lay tangled in their harnesses, still as stone. Elias's stomach twisted. He'd seen too many scenes like this on lonely stretches of road, bandits, rattlesnakes, bad terrain, but something about this one felt different. More violent. More senseless. Then he heard it again. A whimper, soft, desperate. He rounded the burning coach, shielding his face from the heat, and finally saw her. A young woman lay half buried beneath a fallen beam. She couldn't have been more than 19. Her dress was torn and dust-covered, one sleeve burned away entirely. Her hair, braided neatly once, was now tangled with ash and dirt, and her eyes, wide with shock, locked onto Elias the moment he came into view. "Please!" Her voice cracked, raw with fear. "It hurts!" Elias's breath caught. She wasn't moaning. She wasn't pleading in any shameful or suggestive way. She was simply in agony, trapped between fire and debris, with no one else left alive to hear her. "Hold on," he said quickly, dropping to one knee beside her. "I got you. You're gonna be all right." The heat from the fire baked against his back. Sparks floated like angry fireflies around them. The beam pinning her was thick, too thick to lift with brute strength alone. He pressed his shoulder against it anyway, pushing, gritting his teeth. No give. She whimpered again, chest rising in shallow, panicked breaths. I can't move my leg. It's stuck. I think it's broken." Elias forced his voice steady. "Don't think about that. You hear me? You just focus on breathing." He scanned the wreck. The flames were spreading. If he didn't move fast, the entire coach would collapse on them both. He ran back to Juniper, grabbed his rope, and sprinted to a large wedge of fallen rock. Looping the rope around the beam, he tied a quick hitch and threw his weight into it. The rope groaned. The beam shifted, an inch maybe, but not enough. The fire popped behind him, louder now, as if impatient. He tried again. Muscles screaming. Hands burning. Dust choking his throat. The rope strained and fibers snapped near his fingers. The girl squeezed her eyes shut. "Please don't leave me," she whispered. Elias froze, not because he intended to run, but because the words struck a place in him he thought long buried. He'd heard them once before, from a man who didn't live long enough to be saved. Elias had carried that memory like a stone in his chest for years. He would not fail this time. "I'm not leaving," he said, and his voice shook with a fierce promise. "Not now. Not ever." He wrapped the rope around his forearms, dug his boots into the ground, and put everything he had, every regret, every hurt, every ounce of stubborn will, into one brutal pull. The beam lurched upward. The girl cried out, dragging herself free as the wood rolled to the side. Elias dropped the rope and rushed to her, scooping her into his arms just as the burning rear half of the stagecoach groaned and collapsed inward. A shockwave of heat blasted against his back. He didn't stop running until he reached Juniper. He set the girl gently onto the ground beside the mare. Her face scrunched in pain, but she was breathing, conscious, alive. Elias knelt beside her, brushing soot from her cheek. "You're safe now," he said, though his own heart still raced. "I've got you." Her eyes filled with relieved tears. "Thank you. I thought I was going to die." Elias swallowed, his voice thick. "Not while I'm around." He inspected her leg, careful, as he touched the swollen area above her ankle. She hissed through her teeth, but didn't pull back. "Broken," Elias muttered. "But clean. You'll heal fine." She blinked up at him, exhaustion dragging at her eyelids. Who are you?" "Name's Elias Crow," he replied. "I run the Crow Ranch, 2 miles over that ridge." She nodded slowly. "I'm Clara Merrick." "Clara," he repeated, making sure she stayed awake. "Can you tell me what happened?" Clara shivered, though the evening was still warm. "We were traveling from Red Hollow. My uncle and another passenger were with me. Then, something startled the horses. Maybe gunfire, I don't know. The coach veered off the trail, hit the rocks, and then there was fire. I don't remember anything after that." Elias scanned the wreck again. The placement of the beam. The horses' harnesses. The shattered front wheel. Something nagged at him. Something that didn't add up. Stagecoaches didn't fall apart this violently on accident. But he kept that thought to himself. Clara had suffered enough. He slid an arm under her shoulders. "Let's get you home. Doc Grayson lives in town, but my ranch is closer, and you don't need another jolt right now." Clara nodded weakly. "Okay." With steady hands, Elias lifted her onto Juniper, mounting behind her, so she could lean against him. He wrapped one arm around her waist, keeping her steady, as they turned away from the burning wreck. As they rode, Clara's breathing slowed, settling into shallow, exhausted sighs. Elias kept his voice low, soothing. "You're safe," he told her again, though each time he said it, the word sank deeper into him, almost like a vow. "I'm gonna get you through this." Night settled over the land as they crossed the ridge. The air cooled. The world quieted. But Elias's mind didn't. He kept replaying the wreck, every broken piece, every scorch mark, every odd detail. Something had caused that fire. Something deliberate. Something dangerous. And whoever had done it might still be out there. Clara shifted slightly, the movement small and pained. "Elias?" "Yeah." "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "I cried for so long. I didn't think anyone would hear me." He tightened his arm around her shoulders, careful not to hurt her. "You weren't alone," he said softly. "You called and I came. That's how it works out here. Folks look after each other." Clara's eyes closed. "My uncle, he didn't make a sound. I think he—" Her voice wavered. "Please don't let anything bad happen now." Elias looked out over the dusky prairie, jaw tightening. "Nothing's gonna happen. Not while you're with me." But even as he said it, he felt the weight of the truth pressing colder against his spine. Danger had not ended at the wreck. It had only begun. Juniper carried them across the final stretch of prairie until the ranch house appeared. A wide, weathered structure of pine boards and tin roofing, warmed by lamplight spilling through the kitchen windows. Smoke curled from the chimney, smelling of oak and supper. Normally, that scent eased Elias's nerves after long days on the range. Tonight, it barely reached him. His mind was fixed on Clara, on her trembling breaths, on the pallor spreading across her face. "Just a bit further," he murmured. She nodded against his chest, exhausted. The ride from the gorge had drained her strength. Elias dismounted carefully, catching Clara as she slid into his arms. Her fingers clung weakly to his shirt. "It hurts," she whispered, not asking for rescue this time, only admitting it, like a truth too heavy to hide. "I know," he said softly. "You're all right. I've got you." He carried her over the porch and kicked the door open with his heel. Warmth swallowed them. The scent of stew. The low creak of the rocking chair by the hearth. The familiar clutter of boots and blankets and half-mended tack. It wasn't a fancy home, but it was safe, solid in a world that rarely offered that luxury. Elias lowered Clara onto the couch, grabbing 2 thick blankets from a nearby trunk. She shivered despite the heat from the fireplace. Shock, he realized. Pain. Fear. He knelt, tucking the blankets around her. "I'm gonna get water, some cloths for that leg. You stay awake for me, all right?" She nodded faintly. He moved quickly, filling a basin, lighting an extra lamp, grabbing his small medical kit. As he returned to her side, Clara spoke again, her voice thready but determined. Is anyone else here?" "Just me," Elias said. "Closest neighbor's 5 miles out. But you're safe. No one's coming through that door unless I let them." She swallowed hard, eyes glossy with pain. "I believe you." Elias set to work. He cut open the torn remains of her dress around the injury, revealing the swollen, darkening skin. Her leg was broken, but not grotesquely so. No bone piercing through, no twisted angle that would haunt memories. Still, she sucked in a sharp breath when he touched her ankle. "Sorry," he whispered. "It's all right. Just do what you have to." He splinted the leg with straight wooden slats and cloth strips, moving slow, steady, gentle. She bit her lip, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Elias kept talking. Small things, steady things, anything to keep her from slipping into panic. "You're doing real good," he said. "Most folks would be hollering by now." "I'm trying," she whispered. "I know." When he finished, she sagged against the couch, trembling with exhaustion. Elias brushed stray hair from her forehead. "You should rest." Her eyes fluttered. "I don't want to sleep yet. Not until I know we're really safe." "You are," he promised. "Nothing's getting in here. Not tonight." But even as he said it, the memory of the stagecoach gnawed at him. Something had scared those horses. Something had thrown that wheel. Something had set that fire. And none of it felt like chance. Clara's gaze drifted toward the window. "Do you think it was an accident?" Elias hesitated. Just a second. Just long enough for her to see the truth in his silence. "You don't," she whispered. "I'm not sure yet," Elias said carefully. "Could have been a bad wheel. Could have been bandits. Could have been something in the road." She looked away, jaw tight. "There were men in Red Hollow who didn't want us traveling. My uncle argued with someone the night before we left." "What about?" "I don't know. He wouldn't tell me. Just said we needed to get to Clearwater by week's end. He kept checking over his shoulder like someone was following us." A shiver ran through her. "He told me that if anything happened to him, I should get to the sheriff." Elias felt a cold weight settle deep in his stomach. "Clara," he said quietly, "did your uncle say why someone might want to stop him?" "No." Her breath wavered. "But he carried a satchel with him the whole time. Didn't let it out of his sight." She swallowed hard. "It wasn't with him when I woke up." Elias stood slowly. "I'm gonna go back tomorrow. At first light. Look for that satchel. Look for anyone who might still be out there." Her eyes widened. "No. Elias, please. What if they're still there? Then they'll have to deal with me," he said calmly, though heat simmered behind his ribs. But I'm not marching into trouble blind. I'll just look around, see what's what, bring back anything important. Clara's fingers reached weakly toward him. Don't get hurt. Don't leave me alone here too long. He took her hand and squeezed gently. I won't. I promise. She relaxed, just a little, and Elias tucked the blankets tighter around her. The fire crackled softly, warming the room with a slow, steady glow. Clara's eyes drifted closed. You can sleep now, he whispered. She exhaled, long and slow, and slipped into unconsciousness. Elias rose and walked to the window, pushing the curtain aside. The prairie stretched quiet and dark beneath the stars. Too quiet. No wind. No owls. No coyotes yipping from the distant hills. He watched the horizon, jaw clenched. Something was out there. He could feel it. Something that had taken a life and nearly taken another. He locked the doors. Checked his rifle. Sat near the window as Clara slept, listening to every whisper of the night. Hours passed before anything changed. Then Juniper snorted outside, one sharp, warning sound. Elias stood instantly, muscles tensing, heart hammering. He reached the window and looked toward the barn. Nothing moved. But the mare wouldn't make that sound without reason. Elias grabbed his rifle, stepping silently onto the porch. The moonlight painted the land silver, shadows long and sharp. He walked toward the barn, boots barely whispering in the dust. Juniper stood rigid, ears pinned, eyes fixed on the ridge beyond the corral. Elias lifted the rifle, following her gaze. A figure stood on the ridge, still, watching the house. Elias froze, breath held. The figure didn't move, didn't call out, only stared. Then, slowly, it turned, disappearing behind the ridge. Elias's stomach sank. No accident. No coincidence. No random tragedy. Whatever had caused that stagecoach wreck wasn't done. He returned inside, checking the locks again, heart still thudding hot in age. The night passed in fragments, short, shallow stretches of rest interrupted by the creak of the house settling, the sigh of wind pressing against the eaves, and Clara's soft murmurs as she drifted in and out of uneasy dreams. Elias didn't sleep. Not really. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the figure on the ridge again, standing still as a fence post, watching, waiting. And each time Elias opened his eyes, he checked the locks again, checked Clara, checked the windows. By the time the first pale light seeped over the horizon, his muscles ached from tension, but his mind was sharp. He had long ago learned to function on little rest. Ranch work didn't allow the luxury of weakness. Clara stirred just as the sun climbed enough to fill the room with gold. Her lashes fluttered before her eyes opened fully. She winced, her hand instinctively reaching toward her injured leg. Elias was beside her instantly. Easy, he said. Morning's here. Pain'll be stronger till the day settles, but you're safe. She tried to sit up, biting her lip. I didn't dream that, did I? The wreck, my uncle. He shook his head gently. No dream. I'm sorry. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. And last night, did you see something outside? Elias hesitated a moment before nodding. Someone was on the ridge, far off, watching the place. They left when they knew I'd spotted them. Clara's breath froze. So they followed us? Maybe, Elias said. Maybe they were scouting. Maybe they were making sure you didn't live through that wreck. Then he softened his tone. But I'm not jumping to conclusions. People wander these lands all the time. Clara didn't believe him. He could see it, and she was right not to. He stood and grabbed his coat. I'm going back to the gorge. If your uncle had a satchel, it's still out there, or someone came back to take it. Clara pushed herself up onto her elbows, fear twisting her expression. Elias, you can't go alone. What if they're waiting? What if they want you too? Please, don't leave me here helpless. He knelt beside her again, taking her hand. I'm coming back. Before noon. I'll be quiet, careful, and quick. I won't go looking for a fight. But you might find one, she whispered. If I do, Elias said, then it's better I face it away from you. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. If something feels wrong, hide in the bedroom closet. No one knows this ranch like I do. I'll see trouble before it gets inside. Clara nodded slowly, though fear still clouded her features. Elias hated leaving her, but he needed answers. Needed proof. Needed to understand why her uncle's life had been cut short, and why danger seemed to be stalking the open plains. He saddled Juniper, glancing back at the house once more before riding out. Clara stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, watching him with a mixture of hope and dread. Elias tipped his hat, urging Juniper forward. The prairie looked different in daylight, open, spotless, too still. No tracks except his own from the night before. No movement except distant birds. No sign of the figure watching the ridge. But Elias kept his rifle across his saddle all the same. The ride to Dead Man's Gorge felt longer this time, weighed down by suspicion. When he finally reached the mouth of the gorge, the acrid scent of burnt wood still lingered. Smoke no longer rose, but scorched earth and blackened stones marked what had happened. Elias approached the wreck slowly, scanning every shadow, every patch of brush, every path where a boot print might hide. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Nothing watched. At least at first. He dismounted and walked toward the ruins of the stagecoach. Most of it had collapsed during the night. Charred wood lay in heaps. A few wheels remained intact. The horses still lay where they had fallen. Those scavengers had not yet come. The whole place felt frozen in the moment of tragedy. Elias checked the bodies. Clara's uncle lay half-shielded by the wreck, his face peaceful despite the violence of the crash. Elias bowed his head briefly, a small gesture of respect for a man he had never met. Then he began searching for the satchel. He sifted through the ash carefully, overturned broken boards, crawled under the remains of the coach. No satchel. No papers. No sign her uncle had carried anything at all. Which meant one thing. Someone had come back. Elias cursed under his breath. He stood, brushing ash from his gloves, and scanned the ground around the wreck. A few yards away, he spotted footprints, fresh, clean, unhurried. One set. A man's. The prints led toward the ridge, and then disappeared into the rock. He followed slowly, rifle ready. The path was narrow, winding upward between walls of stone. A hawk cried overhead, the only living sound. Elias kept moving, boots silent against gravel. At the top of the ridge, he crouched low and peered across the land. Tracks. Boot prints scattered across the flat stone. A disturbance in the dust. Someone had been here long enough to wait and watch. The same ridge he had seen the figure standing upon the night before. Elias rose, jaw tight. Whoever was hunting Clara and her uncle was bold enough to approach his land. Bold enough to return to the scene of the wreck. Bold enough to steal whatever secrets her uncle had carried. He turned back toward the gorge, only to freeze. He wasn't alone. A man leaned casually against a rock at the base of the ridge, not 30 yards away. He wasn't there moments before. Elias cursed himself for letting his guard slip, for focusing too long on the ridge and not on his surroundings. The stranger wore a dark coat and wide-brimmed hat pulled low enough to shadow most of his face. His boots were dusty. His posture relaxed. His presence unmistakably deliberate. Elias kept his rifle lowered but ready. "You lost?" he called down. The man didn't move. Didn't answer. When he finally looked up, Elias saw only the glint of cold, sharp eyes beneath the brim. "Morning," the stranger said, his voice smooth but empty. "Shame about that stagecoach." "Tragedy," Elias replied carefully. "Happened last night. I was the one who found it. So I heard." The response sent a chill crawling up Elias's spine. Heard from who? From where? No one lived close enough to witness the wreck. "You come here for something?" Elias asked. The man tilted his head. "Just passing through." Elias didn't believe him for a second. "You see anything unusual yesterday? Before the crash?" "Can't say I did," the stranger replied. "But word travels fast. Folks said a girl survived." A pause. "That true?" Elias's grip tightened around the rifle. "Why you asking?" The stranger smiled, the kind of smile that didn't belong in daylight. "Just curious. Hard thing, surviving something like that. Makes a person fragile." Elias's blood ran hot. "If you're looking for her, you won't find her here." "Oh, I wasn't expecting to," the man said softly. "Not yet." Elias lifted his rifle a little. "We got business, you and me?" The stranger shrugged. "Not today." He stepped back once, twice, then moved into the shadow of the rocks. When Elias blinked, he was gone, like he'd been swallowed by the earth. Elias waited, heart pounding, until the air settled again. Then he mounted Juniper and turned toward home, urgency burning through him. Clara wasn't safe. Not even close. And whoever wanted her silence was getting bolder. He rode faster than before, dust rising behind him in a frantic trail. The ranch came into view just as the wind shifted, carrying with it something that made his heart drop. A scream. A familiar one. Coming from inside his house. Clara. Elias kicked Juniper hard, racing toward the porch as another scream cut through the morning air. He leapt off the mare before she fully stopped, torn between kicking in the door or calling to her first. "Clara!" No answer, only a thud, loud enough to shake the floorboards. Elias raised his boot to break the door, only for it to swing open from inside. Clara stood there, shaking violently, tears streaming down her face. "He was here," she sobbed. "Someone was in the house. He tried to open the bedroom closet. I heard him whispering my name." Elias grabbed her shoulders gently. "Did he hurt you?" She shook her head, choking on her breath. No, I hid just like you said. But he was inside, Elias. Inside this house." Elias pulled her into his arms, holding her trembling body against his chest. His jaw clenched, rage and fear warring inside him. They were out of time. Whoever was hunting Clara had reached their doorstep. And Elias knew one truth with absolute certainty. He wasn't letting anyone take her. Not while he lived. Elias held Clara until her trembling eased enough for her to stand on her own. Her fingers clutched the fabric of his shirt, knuckles pale, as if letting go would plunge her straight back into the terror she'd just escaped. When she finally pulled away, her face was ashen and her breathing uneven, but her eyes, those frightened, determined eyes, stayed fixed on his. "He said my name," she whispered again, as though repeating it might make it real. "I heard him in the dark. Footsteps. The sound of a drawer being opened. Then he said it, soft, like he already knew me." Every muscle in Elias's body tightened. "What else did he say?" Clara wiped her cheek with an unsteady hand. "Just my name. Twice. As if making sure I was here." Elias's voice dropped low, steady. "Did you see him?" "No. I hid in the closet and covered my mouth. I heard the floorboards creak. I heard him turning the doorknob. But before he opened it, you rode up." He must have heard Juniper. He ran out the back. Elias exhaled slowly, forcing calm, though his blood still thundered in his ears. You did exactly what you should have done, he said. You stayed hidden. You kept quiet. You stayed alive. Clara shivered again, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. He was inside this house, Elias. Inside. What if he killed my uncle? What if he set the stagecoach on fire? What if he'll keep coming until he finishes whatever he started? Elias didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. The truth was coiled tight around them both, unspoken but undeniable. He stepped out onto the porch, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved but heat haze rising off the prairie. No figures on the ridge. No shapes slipping between the distant cottonwoods. But the silence felt wrong again, too heavy, too expectant. He returned inside, shutting the door firmly behind him. Pack whatever belongings you have, he said. We're leaving. Clara blinked in surprise. Leaving? But where would we go? To Clearwater. Elias began pacing the room, gathering items with quick, decisive hands: water, blankets, bullets, spare rope. Sheriff Abbott's there. Folks at the inn know me. It's a full day's ride, but we'll make it. You'll be safer around people. There's no sense staying in a place a stranger already broke into. Clara's expression wavered. But you said you knew every inch of this ranch. That you could keep me safe here. Elias stopped. He placed a hand on the table, leaning into it, head bowed. When he looked up, his eyes held a weight she had not seen before. I can keep you safe, he said. But I can't promise that a man bold enough to break into my home won't switch tactics. Won't burn the barn. Won't ambush us from the ridge. Won't bring others. His voice dropped. I can fight one man. Maybe two. But last night, and today, something tells me this ain't a one-man problem. Clara swallowed hard. You mean, more than one person is after whatever my uncle had? Elias nodded. The satchel wasn't at the wreck. Someone took it. And whoever they are, they want you quiet before you reach the sheriff. But why? Clara whispered. Why me? Because your uncle trusted you with something, Elias said. And someone wants to make sure you never share it. He watched her absorb that truth, slowly, painfully. She looked down at her splinted leg. I can't ride fast, she said. I'll slow you down. I'm not leaving you behind. Elias replied without hesitation. We'll take it slow, stop when needed. Or I'll ride double with you. We'll make it. And what if they follow? Elias reached for his rifle, checking the chamber. Then they'll wish they hadn't. A fragile silence settled between them. Clara looked toward the doorway, where sunlight pooled across the floorboards. She inhaled shakily. Elias, thank you. For staying. For not giving up on me. He shook his head softly. I don't leave people to die. Not anymore. She didn't ask what he meant by anymore, but he saw the curiosity flicker in her eyes, questions she wasn't ready to ask, and answers he wasn't ready to give. They prepared quietly. Elias saddled Juniper with both their supplies, building a makeshift platform to brace Clara's injured leg. He helped her onto the saddle with care, mindful of her pain. She bit down hard on her lip, trying not to cry out. Once seated, she leaned into him, breathing through the sharp ache pulsing up her side. You all right? He murmured. She nodded, though her hands trembled. Let's just go. Elias mounted behind her, one arm securing her gently at the waist. He spared one last glance at the house, a place that had always been a refuge. Now, it felt like an abandoned shell, its trust broken. Juniper set off across the prairie, hooves thudding softly against dry earth. The morning sun climbed higher, painting the land in warm gold. But Elias didn't relax. Every mile felt watched. Every stretch of open plains felt like a stage where danger might appear at any moment. Clara leaned back against him, her breath brushing his collar. "Do you think he'll come after us?" "That depends," Elias said. "Some men give up when their first attempt fails. And others? Others try harder." She closed her eyes, pressing closer. Hours passed. The land rolled out endlessly ahead, dry grass, scattered rock, distant hills rippling in the heat. Around midday, Elias spotted something in the distance, a lone rider cresting a hill far behind them. A tiny silhouette against the horizon. His heart slammed once, hard. "Clara," he whispered. She opened her eyes slowly. "What is it?" "Don't turn around." "Not quick." "Not yet." Her breath caught. "Someone's behind us." "One rider," Elias said. "Can't tell who. But he's following our trail." Clara's fingers dug into his coat. "What do we do?" "We keep riding," he said. "Steady. Don't look scared. If he speeds up, we'll know his intent." The rider remained distant. A speck. A ghost on the horizon. But he didn't turn away. Didn't change direction. Didn't slow. Clara whispered, "Is it him? The man from the ridge?" "Maybe." The rider followed them for an hour. The same distance. The same pace. Always behind. Always steady. Always watching. As the sun began to sink toward afternoon, Elias made a decision. He guided Juniper into a dry creek bed, following its snaking path until they were hidden by stone walls. Clara's breath quickened. "Why are we stopping?" "We're not stopping," Elias said. "We're making ourselves difficult to track." Clara clung tighter. "Will that work?" "Maybe. If he's not a professional. If he's smart, he'll go around, try to guess where we'll appear. And if he's not smart, then he'll come straight for us." Her voice trembled. "That doesn't help." "I know," Elias said. "But I need you steady right now." He navigated the creek's winding path for nearly a mile before turning sharply into a thicket of juniper bushes and sage. He slowed Juniper, letting her breathe, listening for hoofbeats behind them. Nothing. Just wind brushing through branches. Clara dared a whisper. "Did we lose him?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't want to give her false hope. "Stay quiet," he murmured instead. For several long minutes, they stayed hidden in the brush. Then, hoofbeats. Slow. Deliberate. Growing louder. Clara covered her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Elias raised his rifle. The hoofbeats stopped directly behind the brush that concealed them. For a moment, the world held still. Elias could hear the rider breathing. Not fast. Not strained. Calm. Patient. A man searching for something he already believed he had found. Then a familiar voice drifted through the leaves, smooth, cold, unmistakable. "You can keep hiding," the stranger said softly. "But you won't get far." Clara's entire body went rigid. Elias lifted his rifle higher, every muscle coiled like a spring. The man chuckled, a low, hollow sound. "You've made this interesting. I'll give you that." A pause. "I'll find you again soon." The hoofbeats resumed, turning, retreating, fading slowly into the open plains. Clara didn't breathe until silence settled fully across the land. "Elias," she whispered, "what do we do now?" He lowered the rifle, jaw tight, voice steady as steel. "Now," he said, "we run for clear water before he brings others." The sun was sinking low by the time they left the thicket, bathing the prairie in deep gold and long shadows. Elias kept Juniper at a steady but urgent pace, glancing back every few minutes, never seeing anyone behind them but never trusting the quiet either. Clara leaned forward in the saddle, her breath measured, her leg throbbing worse with each hour that passed. She didn't complain, not once, but Elias could feel the tension in her body like a bowstring pulled too tight. "Tell me if you need to stop," he murmured over her shoulder. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice quivered. "Just keep going." He didn't argue. He understood the fear that lived in her now, fear of being caught still, fear of footsteps drawing close in the dark, fear of hearing her name spoken by a stranger who already seemed to know too much. Motion meant safety. Stopping meant risk. Nightfall crept across the land. The last warmth of the day faded, replaced by cool wind that lifted Clara's hair and stirred the tall grass and waves. The prairie looked different at night, more open, more dangerous. Every shadow felt like a possibility. Hours passed before Elias finally saw the faint, distant glow of lanterns along the horizon. Clearwater, still miles away but close enough to feel real. A soft sigh escaped Clara, half relief, half exhaustion. "We're almost there," Elias said quietly. "Just a little longer." Clara nodded, but her body was trembling. He felt it through the saddle, weak, barely controlled spasms. Pain, fear, exhaustion, all fighting for dominance. She tried so hard to hide it, but the night had stripped her defenses thin. "I didn't think I'd make it this far," she admitted softly, her voice cracking. "Not after the stagecoach, not after the fire, not after today." "You made it because you refused to give up," Elias said. "You're stronger than you think." "No," she whispered. "I made it because you pulled me out of hell. Twice." He tightened his arm around her, not too much, but enough to let her lean. Enough to steady her. As they rode, the memory of the hidden rider haunted them both. Clara kept glancing back over her shoulder despite his earlier warning, scanning the dark for any movement. Elias kept listening, listening for hoofbeats, branches cracks, anything out of place. But the night stayed too quiet. After another hour, when Clara's shaking grew worse, Elias slowed Juniper to a halt near a cluster of low boulders. The sky was a blanket of cold stars, the moon a thin silver blade. The lantern glow of Clearwater flickered distantly but still out of reach. "We need to stop for a moment," he said gently. "Your body won't make it the rest of the way without a break." "No, Elias, what if he..." "He won't," Elias promised. "Not right now. We've put enough distance between us. And even if he tried, he'd be moving blind in the dark." Clara exhaled shakily, her grip loosening as he helped her off the saddle. She winced, hard, as her injured leg touched the ground. Elias caught her instantly, supporting her weight, easing her onto a flat rock where she could rest. She blinked up at the stars, overwhelmed. "I didn't know fear could sink this deep." "It does," Elias said, crouching beside her. "But it doesn't own you. Not unless you let it." Clara studied him through tired eyes. "You sound like someone who's lived with fear a long time." He didn't answer. She didn't push him. Instead, she stared into the prairie darkness. "When I was hiding in the closet today," she said, voice barely above a breath, "I kept thinking he was going to pull me out and I'd never see daylight again. I never felt so helpless." Elias looked at her, really looked at her. The strength beneath her shaking. The courage beneath her fear. The fire beneath her exhaustion. "You weren't helpless," he said. "You survived. That takes more strength than fighting." "I only survived because you came back," she whispered. "You could have left me. You could have put me on your horse and taken me to Clearwater alone. You owed me nothing." Elias swallowed hard, eyes drifting toward the horizon. "I've lost people before," he said quietly. "People I could have saved. People who trusted me. I don't intend to repeat that mistake." Clara's expression softened. "Who?" He didn't respond. He kept his gaze fixed on the prairie, jaw tight, shoulders tense. Clara placed a gentle hand on his sleeve. You don't have to tell me. Not yet. But someday, if you want to. Her voice trailed off, but the offer lingered between them like a fragile truce. Elias rose to check their surroundings, scanning the edges of the dark. No sounds but wind. No glints of metal. No hoofbeats. Just emptiness and starlight. When he returned, Clara had her hands clasped in her lap, knuckles white. "What if he finds us in town?" she asked. "What if he's already waiting there?" "If he's smart," Elias said, "he won't walk into a crowd with witnesses. Men like him don't risk being recognized. They stay in the shadows. They wait. And if he's not smart, then he'll make a mistake," Elias said, "and we'll use it." Clara nodded slowly, but fear still clung to her breath. "I don't want anyone else hurt because of me." "Nobody will be," Elias said. "I'll make sure of it." "You can't promise that." "Watch me." Something in his voice, something fierce, unyielding, made her believe him, if only for a moment. He helped her back onto Juniper, securing her carefully. She leaned against him once more, trusting his steadiness more than her own strength. The final stretch toward Clearwater felt both endless and urgent. The prairie dipped and rose in smooth, shadowed waves. The lantern lights grew larger, closer, real. Clara clung tighter with each mile. By the time they reached the outskirts, Clara was barely conscious from exhaustion and pain. Elias's arm held her firmly, guiding her as Juniper trotted into the quiet cluster of midnight-lit buildings. The town was mostly asleep, only a few windows glowing, the lantern flickering against weathered wood. Elias dismounted, lifting Clara gently into his arms. She didn't resist. Her head rested against his shoulder, eyes half open but unfocused. "You're safe now," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if she heard him. "I've got you." He carried her toward the inn, boots thudding softly against the dusty street. A dog barked in the distance. Wind rustled through an empty alley. But no voices. No footsteps. No stranger lurking at the edge of sight. At least, not yet. As Elias reached the inn door, Clara stirred weakly, clutching his shirt. "Elias, I'm here. Promise me," she breathed, "that you won't leave me alone. Not even for a moment." Elias looked down at her, tired, frightened, but still fighting. "You have my word," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." And with that promise hanging between them, heavy and unbroken, he pushed open the door and carried her inside, unaware that her pursuer had reached Clearwater hours earlier, already watching from the shadows, already waiting for dawn. The innkeeper, a kindly older woman named Mabel, took one look at Clara in Elias's arms and rushed to unlock a room without a single question. Elias carried Clara inside, laying her gently on the bed, as the lantern light flickered across the walls. Her breathing was shallow, but the tension in her body eased now that she was no longer on horseback. Mabel left a basin of warm water, clean cloths, and broth before slipping out, closing the door softly behind her. Elias sat at Clara's side, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered open. "Are we really here?" she whispered. "We're here," he said. "Rest now. I'll keep watch. You promise?" He nodded. She drifted into a deep, heavy sleep, her body finally surrendering after days of fear and running. Elias didn't move from his chair. He watched her breathe, watched the lantern's glow dance across her features, watched the exhaustion melt from her face bit by bit. Outside, the wind changed. A faint creak of a board on the porch made Elias's hand drift toward his revolver. But nothing followed. Just an old building settling under night air. Still, he remained alert. The memory of the stranger's voice in the thicket replayed in his mind, cold, calm, certain. Hours passed before dawn hinted at the horizon. Clara slept without stirring. Elias rose quietly, stretched his stiff limbs, and crossed to the window. Through a slit in the curtains, he scanned the empty street. It looked peaceful, calm, just a normal morning in a quiet western town. But the peace was a lie. A sharp knock sounded at the door. Elias's hand went instantly to his gun. He stepped forward, placing himself between Clara and the door. "Who is it?" he called. "It's me," came a familiar drawl. "Sheriff Abbott." Elias opened the door slowly, weapon still drawn but lowered. Sheriff Abbott, lean, graying, and steady as a post, stepped inside. "Mabel told me you came in late with an injured girl," Abbott said, removing his hat. "So I figured you'd have something important to share." Elias motioned for quiet, then jerked his chin toward Clara. She was still asleep. Abbott's voice dropped. "What trouble you got yourself into now, boy?" Elias explained everything. The stagecoach, the wreck, the fire, the break-in, the shadow on the ridge, the man who followed them, the voice in the thicket, the satchel that had vanished. Abbott listened without interruption, his expression hardening with each detail. "Sounds like you picked up a snake trail," Abbott muttered. "Men who want something bad enough won't mind spilling a little blood to get it." Before Elias could respond, Clara stirred awake, wincing as she tried to sit up. Both men moved toward her, but she held up a hand. "I'm all right," she murmured. "Sheriff, I need to tell you what my uncle gave me the night before he died." Elias and Abbott exchanged a quick glance. Clara took a shaky breath. "He told me he found something dangerous, something worth killing for. He said he hid a ledger inside the satchel. A record of a trafficking ring moving people across territories, forcing them into labor, some disappearing entirely. He said the names inside it were powerful men. Men who paid for silence." Elias felt the room tilt. Abbott's jaw clenched. "Where is this ledger now?" Clara shook her head. "I don't know. The satchel was taken. But my uncle hid a second piece. A map. He said if anyone came for me, I was to give it to the sheriff of Clearwater." She reached under her pillow and pulled out a worn scrap of paper, faintly smudged with soot, edges burned but intact. Abbott unfolded it carefully. Routes, names, symbols, all leading to a point marked deep in the hills. "That explains a lot," Abbott muttered. "These men won't stop." Before Elias could speak, a sudden scream rang out from downstairs. "Mabel." Elias bolted through the door, racing down the stairs two at a time. He reached the bottom just as the front door blew inward, kicked open with violent force. Mabel scrambled backward across the floor, trembling. The stranger stepped inside. Same dark coat. Same stillness. Same unsettling calm. His eyes drifted upward to the stairs, locking instantly on Elias. "There you are," the man said. Elias aimed before the man finished the sentence. The stranger dove behind a table, a shot blasting wood into splinters. Clara cried out upstairs. Abbott rushed to the railing with his own weapon drawn. "Get behind me, Clara!" he shouted. Elias fired again, forcing the stranger to roll behind a support beam. The room filled with dust and echoes, Mabel sobbing against a wall. The stranger yelled, "Hand over the girl, and no more blood gets spilled." "Not happening!" Elias roared. The fight exploded into chaos, a clash of gunfire and shouted orders. Abbott fired from above, Elias from below, each round sending the stranger darting from cover to cover, impossibly fast, impossibly strategic. This man wasn't just hired muscle. He was trained. Professional. Deadly. A bullet grazed Elias's arm, searing pain ripping through his sleeve. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward. He needed to end this. Now. The stranger lunged toward the stairs. Clara screamed. Elias fired, hitting the man's shoulder. The stranger staggered but kept moving, unstoppable, driven by cold precision. Abbott fired again, this time hitting the stranger's leg. He collapsed, gripping the railing. Elias reached him in 3 strides, wrestled the gun from his hand, and pinned him to the floor with sheer force. The man thrashed once, then froze, staring up at Elias with chilling stillness. "You have no idea what you're interfering with," the man hissed. "These people, they own towns. Judges. Lawmen. You think you can stop them?" Elias leaned down, voice low and unshakable. "I don't need to stop them. Just you." The stranger smirked through bloodied teeth. "There will be others. Then they'll fall too," Elias said. Sheriff Abbott snapped irons onto the man's wrists. Together they dragged him outside, where townsfolk had begun gathering, frightened but curious. Abbott signaled 2 deputies to haul the prisoner to the jailhouse. When the danger finally passed, Elias hurried back upstairs. Clara was trembling violently, tears streaking down her cheeks. He knelt beside her, cupping her face gently. "It's over," he whispered. "No," she sobbed. "It's not. He said there would be more." Elias pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as her fear shook through them both. "Listen to me. You're not alone anymore. You have me. You have the sheriff. You have this whole town. And I'm not letting anyone hurt you." "But why?" she cried into his shoulder. "Why do you care so much?" Elias took a long breath, letting the truth settle on his tongue. "I once failed someone who trusted me," he said softly. "I lost her because I hesitated, because I thought fear was stronger than duty. I won't make that mistake again, not with you." Clara pulled back, eyes searching his. "So what happens now?" "Now," Elias said gently, "we expose the men behind this. We end what your uncle started. And we give every soul they hurt a chance at justice." Her voice shook. "Together?" "Together," he promised. Days turned into weeks. The ledger was recovered, the ring exposed, the guilty arrested. Clara healed, slowly, painfully, courageously. Elias stayed by her side through every step. And when spring finally came, bringing green back to the prairie and warmth back to the wind, Clara stood on her own 2 feet again, walking toward Elias beneath the open sky. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," Elias said, smiling softly. "We saved each other." Hand in hand, they walked into a future neither had expected, a future shaped not by fear, but by compassion, courage, and the undeniable truth that even in the harshest landscapes, hope takes root wherever kindness is planted.